What's up guys, Lobos here, multi-season ADC Challenger player, and today I will be going over a Jinx game from patch 9.8 where I am able to snowball the game extremely hard off of good decision making. I will show you how to play Jinx in the early to mid game in a very effective manner to snowball out of control. Jinx is a very strong character when snowballing, and if you use her traps to enable yourself to get kills, you can snowball the game extremely hard. It's always important to look at your lane matchups, no matter who you're playing. In this lane, I have a Lux support against a Kai'Sa and Sona. It is good to know that I can chain my traps off of Lux Q, so if my Lux ever decides to throw a Q out, I should be prepared to chain my E into it. Here, since the enemy Sona has not shown, we are able to get the bot pressure and look for level 2. Since I know that I'm able to have full control in this wave, in this lane, I wait and last hit the wave and prep for my level 2. There's a couple things to note here. It's good to know that my Kindred is going to be fighting for the bot scuttle, so regardless of what my plans are level 2, I should be looking to force the wave in so that I can move to help my jungler if he gets caught. It's also good because if I push the level 2 and the enemy bot lane does not respect it, I have enough backup from my jungler that I feel safe enough to all in on the level 2 versus 1. Here, as I last hit, we noticed that the Sona had just stepped up and is now out of position. I last hit the minion so my Lux can land the Q for level 2. At this point, the next thing that should be going on in my head is to land the E. In your games, you should always be looking ahead on what you should be doing. I knew before I even last hit the minion to get level 2 that if my Lux lands the binding, I need to instantly level my E and trap the Sona. Here, I barely misposition my traps and I put them a little bit behind the Sona. This is okay though, because it forces the Sona to flash. In her own panic, she flashes onto the other trap and allows me to pick up the free kill. Ideally, you want to put your trap right underneath the enemy as they're CC'd so that you can chain it so they do not have any time to flash. If you miss, it's okay as long as you put it behind the enemy so the enemy is forced to flash away. Just like you, enemies are not perfect and sometimes they will make mistakes. Here, the Sona makes a mistake and flashes onto the trap, giving me a kill. At this point, I should look to use my Jinx passive. Jinx has a very unique passive where if you get a kill or assist, you get a speed up and you get attack speed. You should use this after you get a kill in lane to make sure to punish the enemy laner. If you get a kill on the support, you should look to run directly at the AD and hard chunk them. Now that we know that the Sona is dead and the Kai'Sa is level 1, we also see that Kindred is pushing into the bot side to vertical jungle. For those of you who do not know, vertical jungling is when you cut the jungle in half on the map. So the enemy jungler will take your top side while you take the enemy's bot side. This works on both sides of the maps and is very common. Because we know that the junglers are cross-mapping each other, we know that we can look to threaten this Kai'Sa. My whole job at this point is to look to push the wave under tower so we can set up a dive. In your games, if you are cross-mapping, you can look to call for your jungler to come dive the enemy bot laner if he or she is alone. Here, since we have killed the Sona, we feel confident enough that if I hard shove the wave, we can look to get a dive off on the Kai'Sa. For Jinx specifically, you should always look to change to rocket form to fast clear the back wave. Now that our Kindred is here, the Kai'Sa has a decision to make. She can either walk away from the tower and try to escape, or walk back towards the tower and try to protect herself from the dive. If she decides to walk away, then it's up to my Kindred to chase her down. But in this type of dive, I should be looking to cut off the enemy and set up a good trap line. Jinx's traps are extremely good for early game diving, and if you can set them up properly, you can guarantee your team a kill. Here, the instant I see the Kai'Sa turn around, I position myself so that I can put a trap line vertically, so that the Kai'Sa cannot run down. As I place it down, this Kai'Sa is now essentially dead, no matter what we do. As long as we play the tanking game correctly of the turret, no one will die either. In your games, it will be a lot harder to pull off these type of dives, as your jungler needs to have a very impactful role. It's okay for you to call for these dives, but make sure that you are doing your part correctly. Here, since we were able to kill the Sona, I feel confident enough to walk up and hit the turrets. In your games, you should always assess if you feel you are strong enough to go up and get turret plating. The reason why turret plating is so good is because one turret plate gives 160 gold. So therefore, if you are able to acquire 2 plates, you have more than a kill. You should always make sure that you are safe though. Here, we know that I am safe to get the plates because the Sona and Kai'Sa are out of lane and we see the Rengar. And then we see both of the solo laners on the map. Here, the Kindred also decides to make a very poor decision. We know that the Kai'Sa and Sona are walking back from the base, and my Kindred wants to make a play for her stack. In your games, if a jungler wants to make an aggressive play like this, it is your decision to either follow them or let them make their own mistake. Here, I decide to let him pay for his own mistake with a death, because I know that if I try to follow him, I'm going to bait myself into death. So instead, I decide to stay and take a turret plating. I'm not able to get the plating though, but I do actually push the wave in. Luckily, our jungler does not die, but is forced to use his flash defensively. Remember that other people making calls does not mean you have to blindly follow them. If you know the play is bad, you can ping them off and make your own decision. At this point in the lane, it is good to note that I now have a kill and a pickaxe over my enemy. Because of this, I know that I can play extremely aggressive and look to 3v2. When you have a lead on Jinx, it's extremely good to push your lane up aggressively using your rocket form to poke and harass. You always want to make sure that you get vision in the river to see when the jungler is coming. When you're playing Jinx and your support has some CC moves such as Lux Q or Thresh Hook, you can look to play extremely aggressive in a 3v2 and always look to turn. Jinx's passive, Get Excited, allows her to turn 3v2s in a very speedy way. She's able to get her passive off, which gives her a large amount of attack speed, and once you get your passive, you can use that movement speed to dodge skill shots and use the attack speed to shred the enemies. Here, it is good to note how I maneuver the wave. Because I'm able to keep a 4 or 5 caster minion wave, I am now able to freeze this lane defensively. While you can look for 3v2s when you're ahead in bot lane, it is also good to hold a defensive freeze. This is because the enemy bot lane will feel very threatened and will feel the need to break the freeze. If you are stronger than the enemy bot lane and they're looking to break a freeze, you can look to all in. If your support lands any CC or you land a good E behind the enemy, it will guarantee you a kill. Here, since I hold this freeze, the enemy bot lane has to back up and we gain a notable CS lead off of this. We also see that the Rengar is on the top side of the map, so I can look to be aggressive when my Lux decides to. As my Lux lands a Q, I instantly apply the W for the slow and try to trap behind them. As I do not get there in time, it is still a good trade and we go back towards the freeze. The second we see the enemy mid laner come, you instantly want to send your traps to try to cut off the gank. Regardless of who is ganking you, you always want to use your traps to cut off one side of the map. Here, I use my traps to cut off the top side to try to stop the Veigar from getting into his cage range. In your games, you have to remember that Jinx Trap also can stop movement abilities, so even if this was not a Veigar, but was some mid laner with some form of dash, if you are able to get your E off in time, you can still cut them off because they cannot dash through your E. Sadly, I missed my E, and I am not able to cut him off entirely. A better position for me to fire my E would have the first one be here, and then up more, so that he has to walk around the chain chompers. Luckily, my Lux makes a good play and lands a binding, so the gank is non-successful from the Veigar. Here, as my Lux makes another good play, I notice that the Lux is firing the Q and my chain chompers are on cooldown. I look to instantly apply my W to get extra damage off, and if the Q lands, I want to walk up and change to rocket form to secure the kill. The second the Sona dies, I should be looking to aggressively play onto the Kai'Sa. How I talked about before with Jinx's passive, this is a prime example. When the Sona dies, I am able to apply my passive and instantly kill the Kai'Sa. Notice how many auto attacks I get off while she is trying to retreat. Due to the attack speed and move speed combo, when you get good at attack moving, you should be able to get multiple auto attacks off while being faster and moving closer to the enemy. Here, when we look at the map, we see that the Rengar is mid, and we know that the Veigar had just tried to gank us and was low from the gank attempt. Because of this, we know that we can get even more plating. Remember in your games that you should always be looking to count heads before you shove a lane hard. Since we know that we killed both of their bot laners, saw the Veigar mid, and now see the Rengar dead on the map, that is 4 heads, and since we see the Nasus, that is our 5th, so we know where every single enemy is, so we feel safe to get 2 extra platings here. This is extremely big. We now have gotten 320 gold off of plating in the first couple minutes of the game on top of the kills that we have acquired. At this point, I should look to reset and snowball my lead even harder. As we look at the items, we now see that I have a BF and pickaxe combo. Because of this, I know that I can take on basically anyone that comes for the 3v2. Here, my next objective should be to push the tower down and rotate into other lanes to snowball off of turret plating. Like I talked about before, turret plating is a huge deal. Here my Kindred makes a good play and is able to assassinate the enemy ADC from her overstepping. Because of this, we should look to instantly kill this turret and rotate to the dragon. A unique aspect about Jinx compared to other ADCs is how you can use her ultimate. After level 6, you should always be looking around the map to see if there are enemies that you can assassinate with your ultimate. Here, I see that the Nasus and Rengar are looking for a dive. There's a little bit of psychology that plays behind Jinx ultimate. When you are looking to snipe someone across the map, you should always try to think what they are going to do. In this certain scenario, I fire my ultimate right on the back of the minion wave, right in between the minion wave, because I know that if my top laner gets dove and they play it properly, the Nasus is going to want to farm the turret plating. This is because he sees everyone else on the map, and because of this, I'm able to fire my ultimate at the position where I think Nasus will try to farm. We see here that they do end up getting the kill, and as the Nasus begins to walk back, he tries to get the plating, just as I assumed he would, and because of that, my ultimate is able to kill him. In your games, when you're trying to look for cross-map ultis on Jinx, you should always try to think about where the enemy will go and try to logic it out. You should try to use how many people the enemy see from your side. If an enemy sees all 5 members of your team, they're going to feel a lot safer to step up and be aggressive, so you should fire your Jinx ulti where you believe they will be. Here it's also good to note that we should be getting the dragon. In an ideal game, we would rotate to the drag and then rotate our bot lane to topside and get the extra plates. However, every League of Legends game is not the same, and this is a prime example. Because the enemy bot lane decides to get caught again, we are able to hard chunk them and force them out of lane. At this point, I ping my Kindred to stay, but she does not decide to, which is okay. Ideally, our jungler just stays, and we just 3-man this turret and rotate around the map with dragon afterwards. Since we were able to poke out the bot lane so hard, I'm able to walk up and get an inner tower. At this point, I really should be looking to reset. If I am playing the game in a proper manner, I would look to ping my jungler to take the dragon, walk, take the dragon, reset into topside, and look to get plates. Instead, I decide to go for some cheesy play, knowing that the enemy bot lane is tilted. This is not necessarily a bad move, but it's definitely not the proper move on a macro standpoint. In your games, it is okay to look for little cheesy plays like this if you know they're going to work. When I was in the game, I felt that their bot lane would be tilted enough to push the wave up and look to get another wave. Because of this, the Lux and I sit in the fog of war. Due to the vision that we have, we can see if the Sona and Kai'Sa are going to move up. And the second I see them moving up aggressively to get the next wave, I go behind them. As I land the slow, it makes it easy for my Lux to land the bind, and we're able to pick up another kill. I once again use my passive and get a second kill. Just like before, you should always look to chain kills off of your passive. Now that we have reset and we are looking to go into another lane, I should be looking at which lane I want to interact with next. I begin to path top lane, but then I realize that my jungler and top laner have just killed the enemy top laner and Kindred is going for a very poor dive that ends up getting her killed. Because of this, I know that I should be rotating into the mid wave. I do this because I know that my top lane jungle will be able to get a large amount of the turret plating topside, so it's not very beneficial for me to go there. And I should be looking to snowball my lead somewhere else. Remember that when you change forms to rocket form, you get a range advantage. Because of this, you should be looking to play very aggressive if an enemy steps up at all. Here, I also see that my top jungle and support are making a play topside, so I should look to play very defensive until I know where enemies are on the map. I see the Kai'Sa and I see the Rengar, and we know that the Nasus is top lane. So the only people that I have to worry about are the Veigar and Sona. As I step up, I see the Sona on the top side and the Veigar on the bot side of the map. So I am free to go and try to get more turret platings and aggro onto the Kai'Sa. As I'm able to get the turret down to 2 turret platings left, I should be looking to shove mid and get turret plating even more. Remember that when you have a large lead like this, you can even 1v2 and force aggressive plays. I see that my entire team has moved to the top side of the map and they are winning the fight. Because of this, they do not need me to rotate and I can look to get even more platings mid. Remember that turrets also apply Jinx Passive. Because of this, you can look to play off of turrets falling. Here, I decide to not initially get the turret and try to play off the turret passive to reset onto the Kai'Sa. I see that the Veigar has appeared, and at this point I have to make a decision. If I feel strong enough to 1v2 the Veigar and Kai'Sa, I can look to reset off the turret and fight them. Because of my lead, I do feel like I am strong enough to take the 1v2. And as I get my passive off on the turret, I try to turn onto the Kai'Sa. Since I have not been able to get the kills and I have forced sums out of them, I should be looking to retreat and not give away my bounty. If I were playing this properly, I would look to reset, buy my items, and move into a Rift Herald play. I would look for this play because all of the outer turrets are down, the bot inner turret is down, and the mid and top inner turrets are my next objectives. Instead, I get a little bit greedy in game and look for kills. I'm able to snipe off the Veigar, but I give my shutdown to a Kai'Sa. This is not an ideal play, even though the Kai'Sa decides to int afterwards and give us an advantage of numbers. It's still a bad idea for me, because I'm giving the enemy team a shutdown in a scenario where I am in the driver's seat, and I should be looking to close out the game cleanly. As I come out of base, I should be looking about my next play. For me, when I look at the minimap, I see that the ally red buff is up, and that Rift Herald is up. So ideally, I should be looking to farm the red buff into Rift Herald. If my team does not want to make that type of play, I can either solo the Rift Herald or rotate into mid or top lane. Here, I grab the red buff and then see that my allies are fighting, but they are winning very hard because of the fed Kindred, so I decide that pushing mid would be better. Remember that turrets are always the better objectives than 1 or 2 kills. Here, I see that my allies would like to pick a fight near the enemy base, but instead, I decide to focus the turret and keep an eye on the fight. Remember that on Jinx, your rocket does a large amount of damage and executes enemies. Because of this, you can look to stay on turrets, but just keep an eye on the fight to look to see if there's an opportunity for you to ult. Here, as I'm hitting the turret, my eyes are always on what's happening on this side of the map. And as I'm hitting the turret, I see that my allies decide to go in. I believe that the Veigar will live and barely get away from my Kindred, so I decided to fire my ultimate to try to help the team fight. I'm able to get a kill and save my Kindred from the Veigar execute. And because of this, I get enough attack speed to shred the tower and move on to the next one. Once again at this point, I should be looking for towers unless the enemy team steps up way too aggressive. At this point, I feel like I have the ability to 3-shot the enemies based off my 2 items, and I can play very aggressive. If the enemy decides to step up at all to defend their towers, I am definitely strong enough to take them on. In your games, you should always know where your item spikes are. For Jinx, your 2 item spike with Infinity Edge Hurricane is extremely large, but not as large as your 3 item spike. Traditionally for ADCs, your 3 item spike is usually the point where you are able to do a large amount of damage and carry team fights. However, when you are very far ahead, your 2 item spike can be extremely deadly due to crits. Here, I see that the Rengar steps up a bit too far, and I look to go aggressively onto him. Notice that once again, I try to use my turret reset to get in range of the enemy. The second I get the reset, I should be looking to move on to the next target. In your games, you should always be looking to find a good balance between going for kills and objectives. Here, I overstep and go way too aggressive onto the enemies when I should be looking to basically just end the game. Even though I'm able to get a kill, I eventually give the enemies yet another shutdown. An ideal play would have been for me to rotate into bot lane and get the bot turret with my Aurelia. Because of this, not only do I give a shutdown, but my Aurelia also gives a shutdown over, on top of my jungler dying. This would be a very big gold swing if the game was closer, and this would all be caused from my poor decision making. Remember that the stronger you are in a game, the more your decision impacts the end result. Luckily for me, we are so far ahead that the enemy team feels it is necessarily to FF, and we eventually win the game off of the enemy team conceding.